All right, we'll call together the Woodburn City Council meeting of October 14th, 2019. Please rise for the flag salute. Thank you, Heather. May we have the roll call?
Councillor Cornwell.
Present.
Councillor Cabrales.
Here.
Councillor Carney.
Here.
Councillor Ellsworth.
Here.
Councillor Schaub.
Here.
Councillor Morris.
I'm here.
Mayor Swenson.
Here. Thank you very much. We have three announcements. City Hall, the library, and the Aquatic Center will be closed on November 11th in observance of Veterans Day. The City Council meeting scheduled for November 11th has been moved to Tuesday, November 12th, and the Aquatic Center will be closed from November 11th through the 15th for maintenance projects to be completed. We are going to jump right to presentation, and as well we'll have Dylan Wells and Anthony Valise from our Community Center Committee who can join in after the presentation. So welcome.
Thanks. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Jim Rao, Assistant City Administrator, and I've got Jim Cavalage with OPSIS Engineering here to take us through the presentation. This is our first opportunity to come back to the council since you authorized us embarking on this next phase of work, I think in June. So we've been working for 3 or 4 months. We've assembled a Citizens Advisory Committee that's met, I think, probably 4 times. We've held a public open house, taken a lot of feedback in coming up with a concept that we're going to present to you tonight. We actually have a recommended concept from the Citizens Advisory Committee, which we'll probably spend the most time on, but we're also going to highlight some of the alternatives that were considered, just so you know everything that the committee looked at. One of the things that we're going to be hopefully receiving from you is guidance on which of the concept plans you would like us to pursue. So you could say we want you to pursue the detailed design work for the concept that the advisory committee recommended, or you could actually recommend some changes to that as well, because the next phase of work is where we're going to be headed next, and that's like really heavy architectural design work. So we really need to know what it is that you want us to design before we embark on that phase. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim, and he'll go through the presentation.
Might I interrupt you, Jim?
Sure.
So I don't want to sidetrack you while you're doing your presentation, but I read all the staff report on the things that you have been working on with the committee, and it's great. It really looks good. There was one thing I was going to ask if you might be able to look at in the future, no matter which concept we come up with. Years ago, when I worked in the timber industry, we used to drive plywood, and the plywood, of course, released a lot of moisture, similar to the moisture that's in our pool. And one of the things that they did in that industry was they developed a device that would gather up the moisture and sidetrack it so that it didn't corrode the metal work inside, which is a similar problem I think we would confront with the chlorine in our pool. But the second thing it did was it recovered the heat that would be in there and brought it back in to be used elsewhere in the plant. And something you might think about for recovering the heat to work with the water.
Yeah, and that's pretty standard technology in aquatic center natatoriums now. In fact, we upgraded our ventilation system about 10 years ago to a system that pretty much does just that. The system that we had prior was one that we ended up with, it was kind of a value engineering decision. When they built the aquatic center, the costs were coming in too high, and so they saved money on the ventilation system, which is probably the worst thing that you can cut back on an aquatic center. And so we experienced really poor air quality and a lot of degradation to the building. So that prompted us to, conduct a study and figure out if a better system would be a solution that we should pursue, and we did. It monitors temperature and moisture levels in the building, and it adjusts the amount of outside air that it brings in accordingly, and it's got a heat recovery system. So if it is throwing out a lot of that chemical-laden moist air, it's recovering the heat so that the air coming back in is re-injected into the air. So what we do, it's a pretty good system now.
Good.
Yeah. And,
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Jim, one of the points I want to also just kind of stress a little bit before we move on to the presentation is about what we're asking the city council to do this evening, which is to consider the recommendation from the Community Center Advisory Committee that's been working on this, and give direction to staff. But I want the council to know that this is a really critical point in the progression of this project. Given the timeline and the funding that's attached to it, when you make a decision tonight, this is well, I wouldn't say you can never go back over this bridge, but it'll become extremely difficult and expensive once this direction is given to try to back up. So once we start down this road, there's going to be a significant amount of investment of time and dollars in architectural design and engineering work that's going to go into that. And so, we'd have to duplicate that entire effort and expense, which we don't have the resources for in the grant, if we were going to decide down the road to do something completely different. So I just want that to sink in a little bit, that nothing's impossible, but this is a significant decision point on this project moving forward, and it will be difficult once this decision is made to make a different decision down the road without reinventing a new process with funding.
That's fair. And if the council doesn't feel prepared to make that recommendation tonight and would like some time to kind of chew on it, one option is for us to come back at the next meeting on October 28th and actually put a staff report before you to act on. So that's an option if you're just really not comfortable being able to kind of absorb all the information tonight.
Okay.
Great.
You have the floor.
Thanks, Jim. Again, Jim Calvledge, partner at Opsis Architecture. It's wonderful to be working with your community. Partner in my office and our other staff worked on the Success High School, and we just think Woodburn's a great community, and this is the type of project that we love to be involved with. It's a project that has a long history, actually, going back to the early 2000s, almost 17 years ago. There were a couple of prior bond measures that didn't come to reality. Again, back in 2006, another effort to look at a community center feasibility study. That was complete in 2008. An updated version of the feasibility study in 2017, which was complete in 2019. That kind of brings us to where we are now. I just want to say that in the work that we did, we really looked at a lot of the good effort that went in to this project previously. There was a lot of public survey work, a lot of attention to the desires and the type of program elements, space program elements that the community wanted. Those included a 2-court gymnasium, an elevated running track, creating a cardio weight area, exercise rooms, consideration for community gathering space for the older adult senior population, and also creating a home for a Boys and Girls Club. Those are kind of the highlights of what we were working with. And so that really informed the program revisions and refinements, as well as concept design work I'm going to share with you. One of the elements that did come up as a new feature really had to do with making sure that there was adequate attention given to the existing swimming pool and natatorium space, that there's a refresh, so when an addition happens, you don't open up and it's like, well, the pool looks like the old pool. So there's a lot of things that work well with the pool, but certainly looking at the deck and some enhancements. And one of the key program elements that came up was considering adding a warm water recreation or program pool. As you might be aware, the existing lap pool has a water slide that goes into it. Actually kind of interferes with some of the programming of that lap pool. So the idea was to create a warm water pool, it's a shallow water pool. It would have a 0 depth entry and have programming features for water aerobics, perhaps a current channel that could work for both youth as well as resistance and therapy, walking against the current, and then creating a water slide that would come out into a runnel. So it's a much more efficient way to think about the pool. So as we go into the plans, you'll see this as a new feature. And it was a feature that the advisory committee was very supportive of, something that they really initiated, as well as I think the public also supported it. This just shows you the number of meetings we had with Jim and the technical committee, but more importantly, the citizen advisory committee, which was a large group. I think, not everyone can make the meetings, but it was like 12 to 16 people, a really broad range of the community was represented, and really strong participation and interest. It wasn't a passive group. They were very, very involved in guiding this process. And then there was a public open house on the 25th of September. It was at the Aquatic Center. It was very well attended. We also had a public outreach consultant that was able to help with some communication, bilingual communication, as well as surveying. There were 25 survey participants, so we got some really good feedback. It was all actually very supportive of all the elements I just described to you, including the warm water pool. This is a schedule of kind of where we're at. As Jim said, we've been working on this since June. The red dash line kind of graphically kind of shows you where we are right now with the city council meeting. And we are at this kind of critical juncture where we're ready to launch into schematic design, which would lead into more detailed design development. And that would all be within the scope of what would be potentially funded. This next schedule kind of gives you a broader look at the overall project schedule. A little hard to read, but what it's showing is going through, as I mentioned, schematic design, design development, which would take us through kind of April of this year. The kind of yellowish orange colors, the summer months. And the idea is by the time we complete design development, there would be time to really start to formulate and consider an informational campaign preparing for a bond that would happen in November is the plans as we understand it right now. That's the other red dash line with the red dot. Assuming a successful bond passing, then we would spend the next 5 months doing the construction documents and specifications, which would then allow the project to be bid, go out for a permit, and start construction kind of in their late spring, early summer of 2021. So taking a look at the concept design, really it kind of starts with the site itself, which we wanted to kind of show a drawing that showed an expanded site context. The project has a really great address as a terminus of First Street. And it currently, as you sight down First Street, you really aren't aware that there's an aquatic center there. There's one large tree, but the building's kind of hidden behind it. And it's a really prominent civic street, as you know. We're in the City Hall, which is on this street, the library, there's parks. It's a vital street with retail. Parallel to that, you have Front Street, and the idea that has a very different kind of presentation of the building. Instead of seeing the end of the building, you're seeing the length of this potential community center. It has, again, a very important civic presence. Part of this plan is to really rethink and revitalize Settlemyre Park, creating really strong pedestrian connection from First around the building into the park, almost considering the idea of a panhandle where the park kind of wraps around the building so it greets you. You may not even be going to the community center, but you want to go to the park. We want to bring the park and give it an address on First. And then to really think about activities that could happen within a revisioned Settlemyre Park. And part of our study is to think about a vision that goes beyond probably what would be the immediate funding, but to think about a master plan for the park that might have separate funding, but to really envision the park in the community center in a seamless way. You also see a little dash red line going through the site, and that's an important pedestrian trail and that we want to reinforce and make that even stronger, a way to connect different sides of the community. This is a plan that shows the footprint for the expanded community center. As a point of reference, there's a kind of a square shape, slightly rectangular in the plan, kind of in the heart of the plan. That's the existing lap pool as a point of reference. So this particular, the way we're thinking about it, the expansion would go both towards the north and towards the east and towards the south. The idea being that there would be a really inviting address at the end of First Street, an inviting plaza. The lobby would be facing out towards First. There's also, as you might know, there's half of a city block on the west side of First that is underutilized right now, and the thought was to develop that as some parking that would serve the community center. What's fantastic about that is that parking is very close to the front door, would provide enhanced accessible parking and short-term parking for patrons of the community center. And then as you look to the east, between the community center and front, there's this kind of curved shape of parking. And the idea there is to really bring the landscape around the building, not have a parking lot that is nicely landscaped, and it's not like you're just perceiving a commercial parking lot. It's a parking lot that feels like it's part of the park. The other thought was to fill in the northeast corner of that parking lot. As you might be aware, that's where the tennis courts are, and they're kind of sunken down. So using some of the excavation of the building to kind of lift that level up. So when you park there, you'll be much closer to the grade of the building. So really thinking about accessibility, universal accessibility. And of course, if we remove the tennis courts, then we need to replace them. So you'll see in this plan, we have a home for the tennis courts. They're kind of down in the kind of south kind of triangle of property. That's kind of southeast of the neighborhood access parking lot. So that's where we're thinking take a better advantage of that land for the tennis courts. And then really just creating a nice open lawn area and setting the stage for a potential further enhancements of the park. So this is kind of considered the baseline scope of work that would be associated with building the community center. Some of the amenities as we start to think about the park would include obviously the tennis up above, which would be part of the initial phase of construction to replace the tennis courts, but also looking at program elements that we heard from our advisory committee, futsal, basketball courts, taking what is now the children's playground and kind of pulling it out of the forest setting to be in a more open and accessible part of the site, maybe even a more safe area. And even thinking about that playground being accessible to all sorts of abilities. So that's an important consideration that came up as well. Even considering integrating art into the park. Ideas of open lawn activities, even perhaps a picnic shelter, event space, again, maybe even nature play opportunities. So different types of playground amenities and just casual seating and hangout areas in the park. And then outdoor event space. There's some topography and elevation change between the kind of forested bench and where the skate park is and the lower playing field, and how can we turn that into amenities with some terrace seating and places for spectators to watch futsal games or basketball games, and even community events and so forth that could happen either in the park or even within the parking lot. So this is a vision of how the park could be expanded to accommodate those amenities that I just described. As you see down in the lower portion of the plan, there's the tennis courts, and the idea is to really kind of extend up kind of a series of park amenities. Just above the tennis courts would be a possible site of the picnic shelter, so it's accessed directly from the parking area and contiguous to the outdoor playground for children. Thinking about a basketball court just north of there, perhaps creating another kind of park amenity, outdoor space and seating area that helps connect the open lawn area back to where the forested zone of the park is. And then at the very top, a location perhaps for a futsal court. And again, that's where we get some of the embankment sloping down and getting spectator seating. Thinking about the forested zone, which is a lot of heritage trees there and history that we want to preserve, being perhaps better lit. So amenities to make it safer and more active throughout the day. So that's the kind of vision for the park itself. So as we start to think about the program and the building, these are just some images of projects that we've done that have some similarities, not exactly, but this is the Furstenberg Community Center in Vancouver. And I think one of the thing we're trying to convey here is from the road, as you look to the building, you're seeing a lot of transparency. It's an inviting building. It puts itself on display, which really helps draw the public in and really celebrate the activity within the building. It's also a building that not only has a kind of more urban face, civic face, but it also has a side to the building that opens up to a park-like setting. And we think that's kind of obviously an attribute of this site, that the building should really engage the park. Some images, this is a project at Western Oregon University that we did. It's a 3-court gymnasium in this scenario. We're looking at a 2-court gym that has an elevated walk-jog track. Also has lots of great daylight too, which really helps with energy savings, but also creates a more delightful place for the community to recreate in. We're also looking at group exercise rooms that have a sprung floor. You can do Tai Chi and aerobics, Zumba classes. We're looking at 2 size rooms, one's smaller, one's larger, to accommodate different size groups. Also a cardio weight area with a variety of equipment to serve both beginners as well as senior population, and really bring fitness to a forefront. That's such a critical issue that was brought up by our committee. The issues of wellness, obesity, so many issues of health and wellness that these types of amenities really help address. This is the warm water program pool. It can be designed a number of ways. These are just a couple of examples that show some of the amenities that you can start to have with a zero depth, what we call like a beach entry. So parents can be there with their toddlers. People have mobility issues, becomes an easy way to access into the warm water. There's play features there for kids. Oftentimes there's a current channel, as I was describing, that serves all age groups. Water slides, there can be a rectangular shaped tank within the warm water that really works well for programming classes, water aerobics and so forth. This is a type of body of water where you can fit a lot of people in a relatively small area. And also is a virtue in terms of revenue generation and attracting all age groups, especially families, to a building like this. The other thing that we try to build into facilities and what we're hearing from the community is this notion of mixing social space and recreation. It's not like the old days where you walk in a door, show your pass, and go down the corridor of the locker room. Building in places for the community to meet, hang out with each other, relax. The impromptu kind of running into your neighbor and creating environments that support that social interaction. And then we also heard a lot about having a community space that is highly flexible. You could subdivide it into perhaps 3 separate rooms that if it was completely open, you might have a sit-down dinner for 250 people around tables. You could set it up in lecture style. You could break it into 2 large chambers and a single one, so you can have multiple activities happening concurrently. So if there's a senior gathering, Meals on Wheels, whatever, that could be happening in one portion, another group could be meeting separately. There would also be a warming kitchen directly adjacent to the community room. That was also viewed as an important asset. And as we start to move into the next phase of schematic design, and we had quite a lengthy discussion with our advisory group that the character of this building is going to be really important. And we're not there yet in terms of being able to share that, but how it really reflects this community, both the old believers in the Russian community and the Latino community, how it can celebrate the culture, the successes, the high school soccer team, that's outstanding. How can that be celebrated on the walls of the building, integrating art, community room that can accommodate music. So very, very unique. When it's all said and done, it's really a reflection of Woodburn, like no other community center. So this is a layout of the plan. I won't spend a lot of time on it, but I think one of the things we're really trying to do is make a very efficient plan. We know there was a prior layout that was done. It had some functional challenges that we tried to address and make the building very efficient so there's not excess to it, but it makes sense. It's like common sense. And so the idea is that brick color faces back out to the street, and that's where we're thinking a community room would be located, the Boys and Girls Club. It's like an interior street that runs in the east-west direction. It would have across the hallway facing the existing pool, a birthday party room, a flexible, basically meeting room, but great place for kids to have parties and revenue generation. Also a child watch area, so if a parent comes in and they're by themselves or just both parents want to recreate, you want a safe place for your child, that's where you could bring them. So it's really an important attribute to think about building into the building. Right at the kind of juncture of the lobby area, in the purple color would be the administration spaces and the welcome desk. So the idea is to allow that to be positioned so it has really good monitoring down the community wing space, but also has good visibility and access to the recreation wing. And as you move past that going towards the south, there's the gray block of program, and you can probably see it in the plan, is where locker rooms would be. There would also be a number of family changing rooms, or what are referred to as really universal changing rooms. They're really popular and important, especially with any sort of aquatics component. And then as you continue all the way down that hallway, then there's the 2-court gymnasium. There would be divider curtains. You could actually divide it into quadrants, so you could have 4 separate activities going on. Multiple basketball hoops. So it has kind of a youth focus. That was something that really came out in terms of the programming that we heard, keeping it really very flexible space. Bleacher seating, so parents and friends can observe the activity. And then the blue area indicates the existing lap pool. We aren't changing that. We're trying to make it more usable by relocating the water slide, which is located in an addition to the south. That's to the south west corner. You can see those kind of squirrely lines. That's the a diagram of the water slide, and the idea is that you come out into what's kind of a runnel or run-out space, so you aren't using valuable water that would be in deep water for coming out of the water slide. That warm water pool is about 3,500 square feet. We would also have a spa and sauna. Those amenities exist now, but now there's currently 2 sauna spaces, and the idea is to create one that's on the deck, would be adjacent to the spa, and then right next to the lifeguard station. So there's just better supervision and monitoring from an operational perspective. So that's the ground level plan. The upper level would have a walk-jog track. That's a kind of open elliptical shape that inscribes the 2-court gymnasium. And then directly north of that, the number 2 is a cardio weight area. And part of our team member who's not here, Ken Ballard, he does work nationally related to the programming and financial and operational projections for projects like this. And that's one of the amenities that really helps with the cost recovery. So this plan has about 4,500 square feet of cardio weight equipment. And then the number 1 spaces towards the top of the plan, those are the 2 multi-purpose exercise rooms. So that's really the program elements that are in the building, how it's laid out. So then what I'd like to do is just quickly go through a couple of the options that we looked at, just so you have the benefit of the background that our advisory committee had. This is what I just showed you, option 1A, with the water pool area, 3,500 square feet and a water slide. This is option 2A, and the real difference between 2A and 1A has to do, and I'm showing it here in the red rectangle that just came up on the screen, it's whether or not we save the existing wading pool. So option 1A was based on the premise that we could better utilize that space for other functions, especially with the warm water program and recreation pool. The question was raised, well, how are we using this small wading pool? And Kim Ballard also, he felt that that smaller pool is going to have to operationally be maintained. You still have the mechanical equipment, and yet its usability is really pretty compromised. You're much better off having a larger warm water pool that can serve more people and more activities. But we wanted to run through that option. And this, what just popped up is this kind of red linear rectangle, shows that the footprint for option 2A is almost 3,000 square feet smaller than option 2A, because we're able to create a more compact footprint, which has the result too of giving a little more park space back. So as you recall the parking layout, that kind of curved shape, we'd like to give as much landscape between the parking lot and the building. And so this has that added benefit to offering that. The upstairs, which I just showed you, I misspoke. The cardio weight area is actually 5,600 square feet here, because we're able to build out over the some of the program space below. Whereas in the option 2A, we're at 4,200 square feet. So there's a net gain of 1,400 square feet of cardio weight area, which when we get to operational projections, has some real benefit to the cost recovery model for the building. And we also looked at basically what if we had a smaller recreation pool. Instead of 3,500 square feet of water, what if it was 2,800 square feet of water, and perhaps we didn't have a water slide, which is an amenity you have now. We ran this option there's more information here we need, by our committee and also the aquatics director, Josh, and there was strong consensus from the committee that the larger recreation pool really offered so much more in terms of programming opportunities, as well as a water slide that would be a more robust feature that really would attract teens and tweeners and folks to the pool that might not otherwise, find it exciting enough. So, and I'm almost wrapped up here. I just want to have questions, but this is some of the numbers that we've run for the various options. On the left side is option 1A. This is replacing the no wading pool in a larger rec pool. The direct construction cost is about close to $37 million. This is an 83,000 square foot building. That equates to about, around $440 a square foot, and which sounds like a lot, but in today's construction world, it's actually what we think, is a good number. We're doing a community center now in Hillsborough. That's $540 a square foot without aquatics. So there's definitely real value that's being leveraged with your existing pool, taking advantage of that. And what used to be a $350 square foot building is now $550. So we think, just as a double check, we feel like these are sound numbers. And these were developed by architectural cost consultants who we do a lot of work with. They did your prior estimate too, prior to us coming on. So the construction cost is part of it. Then you have to consider the indirect project cost. That's usually, and we're using kind of rules of thumb here, but usually 30%. And that includes all your permitting and fees, construction contingencies for unknowns. There's furniture and equipment, a number of things. If you hire a construction manager, all that is bundled into those indirect project costs. So the total capital cost in this scenario is $52.7 million. Below that are the expenses and revenues. These are rough order of magnitude. These are done by Kim Ballard, hot off the press, based on these options. He thinks that the expenses would range between 1.9 and 2.3 million, with the revenue generation of 1.3 to 1.6. So you're looking at an operational deficit of about $600,000 to $700,000 a year. To put this in perspective, you're spending about $350,000 a year currently on your existing aquatic center. So this would be, another $250,000 to $350,000. $250,000 to $350,000 more a year. As we go into more detailed design, Ken will sharpen his pencil on these numbers and really drill into it, working with staff. So these are, again, order of magnitude, but to give you kind of a realistic range of what you might expect. I'm not going to go through the detail on 1B. It's basically the same drill, but you can see the costs go down slightly less with the smaller recreation pool at 2,800 square feet. This is the option 2, which is 50, almost 52 million. And if you go with a smaller recreation pool, it's closer to 49.7. The overall number range is fairly close. And our advisory committee was asked to weigh in on this, and it was a unanimous vote on their part to go with the option 1A, the preferred option that I first showed you. So that's where we are. Questions?
Mr. Mayor, can I ask just a quick clarifying question on the hot off the press operational
Yeah.
revenue? Can we back up to that slide real quick?
Sure. Yeah.
As I talk about this, I want to make sure that I'm saying something that is accurate and true.
Yeah.
So the expenses and the revenues do not contain the current aquatic center revenue and expense projection built into that, or they do?
They do. This is all in. I was just, as
So
a
the
point,
expenses include the operation of the existing aquatic center plus the additional, and then
Yes.
the revenues. So, so the $600,000 to $700,000 operational deficit includes the existing subsidy to the aquatic center?
So essentially, we
As a
currently spend
revenue?
about $350,000 of general fund subsidy to
I
operate the
understand.
aquatic center.
Yeah.
We would essentially double that
Okay.
to operate this new larger facility.
Okay, so that would be an
does
additional
include
general fund
aquatics.
subsidy then, unless there was some other, I got it.
Or triple it if you went to the ones on the next slide.
Yeah, the ones on the next slide, interestingly, while the construction costs are lower, the operating subsidy is projected to be quite a bit higher.
So my interpretation is if we build a better facility, more people will come, that will offset the costs and generate better revenue.
which is a very important thing to have brought up that I kind of didn't spend any time on. I'm glad you picked up on that. I mean, it's a significant difference, and it really has to do with a lot of it. Really, the larger cardio weight area that I referenced really helps, and having a more robust recreation pool where you can do more programming in that and attract all age groups to that pool.
And having been to these meetings, the research that you did with, like, in our community and in the surrounding community, there was like a circle. So people that would come to this, like, would be this much closer to Woodburn than Newburgh's Aquatic Center, for example, or
Yes.
McMinnville's. And they really had drilled down to the median income of people and which people would be likely to participate in this kind of center, so.
Two questions. How much is it going to cost a participant that wants to come use the aquatic center? Or the center?
Right. I don't believe that's really been worked out yet.
Nope.
That would be part of the next stage.
So how can you project revenues then?
Well, again, there's a range there. I don't feel comfortable sharing what Ken would probably be using as an order of estimating what the fees would be, but there are kind of shared kind of conventions between community centers.
Yep.
They fluctuate a bit, and so.
But I see you comparing us to Hillsborough and Vancouver. Our
Sure.
population doesn't have the income of those locations.
And he's taking all that into consideration. Those were projects that I'm personally working on. His breadth of experiences nationally with a lot of communities that would be similar to Woodburn. And so he's definitely taking that into consideration. And perhaps in another community with a larger population, a different economic, range, maybe the subsidy would be less. So these are definitely considerations that Ken has given to this. And I wish he was here, or on the phone, because he would give you a better answer. And we can certainly follow up with sharing
That would be
what
good.
his projections are based on.
Yeah,
And-
those were interesting slides that he showed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the market analysis that he completed is posted on the community center webpage down towards the very bottom, and so that information really was revealed during the market study that he did, and he was pretty frank that you're not gonna see the same financial performance that, say, the Furstenberg facility sees in Vancouver.
And when we first started talking about this, we stressed the need for the senior center to have kind of a permanent location, and I don't know how that is incorporated into the plan even.
Yeah.
You have the community rooms, but they're asking for space that they can leave stuff. in.
Sure. That's a great question. And what we're seeing now in the community centers that we've been working on, and this is true for Ken around the country, is these facilities they have such a range of users depending on the time of day. And so instead of a dedicated, here's the senior room, creating amenities that can be used by diverse population throughout the day. So for instance, a senior group more likely is coming in 9 o'clock in the morning till 1 in the afternoon, and then at 2:30 or 3 we get the teens coming in, And so what we found is if you really look at the usage patterns, that these spaces, instead of being dedicated and being used for 4 hours a day, can we make better use of them? And what we found, the feedback from the senior population is that when they're in the facility, it's like a deluxe senior center because you've got large meeting rooms, you've got lounge areas, there's fitness and aerobic rooms. The whole facility is essentially perceived to be for their use. Different times of the day where the teens and adult population comes in, that use pattern changes. So that's really the idea, and that also really is a key part of creating an efficient facility that it's all about multi-use and utilization. And to your other part of the question, for that community room to really work, you need to have some really good storage area. And so that's really part of all the multi-purpose rooms, whether it's for exercise or the community room, some very large-scale storage space. And otherwise, they're kind of multi-useless, right? Because
Right.
if you don't have a place
For
to put
tables
your
and-
items. So
yeah.
that's a key part of the planning.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think the as a user now, it is a senior center. When I do aqua aerobics at like 9:30, there's me and people slightly older than me, and so it does kind of have that feel during the day. And then when I use it in the afternoon, then like that's the kids are there, but other people have gone home. But I do know that the kitchen that you've developed
Yes.
was really at the behest of the senior center group. So that kitchen is then right next to a portion that could become Meals on Wheels. It could
Exactly.
be having all kinds of
Yes.
they could have their like Zumba classes in that space to make it kind of feel theirs.
Yeah.
You know.
And the regional director for the Meals on Wheels program is a member of the committee and has been providing a lot of feedback on the design of the space. And so that was really helpful to us.
Debbie, any questions?
Yeah, so I'm thinking for upstairs, how are people that aren't able to walk up a lot of space, like stairs and like are on wheelchairs? Did you think about like how would we make that ADA accessible?
Well, I skipped over that. There is an elevator.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's a good size freight elevator.
Okay.
Not freight, but it's sized so you can put fitness equipment, move items up and down, and because of that, it's appropriately sized for a group of people. It's not a small elevator, and the other thing that's great about it, at least in this initial layout, it's located right next to the stair, so it's there's that kind of sense of equity about that location that we think is important, that it's not isolated from where other people are going up the stairs. So when you come up that, it's located, it's that kind of white X box next to number 1. And that's where the stair comes up, so the elevator's right there. And then, down below, it's right next to the stair as well. Behind right next to the gray locker room area and where the purple color is for the admin.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Any further comments coming down the line? Questions?
My wife likes to play pickleball.
Yeah.
Where
yeah.
can she play?
Well, absolutely. I think within the gymnasium, it's a highly flexible space. We can fit 4 pickleball courts. I mean, the courts are going to have a lot of different marking to them, but done sensitively so it's not appearing chaotic with too many lines. But yeah, pickleball is super popular, and we're building those lines into all of the gymnasium spaces. And they can also find their way to the outdoor amenities in the park as well. So, yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I didn't mention pickleball, but that's a really important activity.
Yeah, the courts are designed to be multi-purpose, so basketball, pickleball, badminton, volleyball, futsal. It's kind of our design intent.
And Jim, can you talk a little bit about the outside plans? That's like a phase 2 or a phase
Right.
another time and maybe even a different pile of money. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, yeah, I think it'll definitely be a different pile of money. What we're including in the cost estimate for this particular project is phase 1 of the outdoor improvements, which are necessary really just to open the doors. And then phase 2 just creates a vision for future expansion and enhancements that would be funded through other means. And so I'm thinking park SDCs and grants, which are our typical funding sources for park improvements. If the community center project is approved and starts moving forward, we'd probably actually work on fundraising for phase 2 park improvements right away, with the hope of actually being able to implement those at the same time.
And that is a question I regularly ask, like, so, because we have different apartment complexes coming in and different homes, and just looking at that timeline, when X is decided to be built, like, when will that produce SDCs, and when will that, how would that converge with this?
And the
Sure.
tennis courts have to be built under another requirement, correct?
They do. They were funded by a Federal Land and Water Conservation Fund grant, I think in 1978. And so we're required to maintain those in perpetuity. And so if we take them out, we're required to replace them. Plus, they're the only tennis courts that we have in our park system. And so we feel it's important to keep them. They're actually well used. I've seen the mayor out there on them.
That's right. Expression of my seniorness.
I have a question about the Boys and Girls Club. Is the Boys and Girls Club that's dedicated for this facility to take the place of the one we're already using?
Yeah, so the idea is we would move them into the building. We've designed their own dedicated space. For security reasons, they do need their own dedicated space. And so then the plan is to remove the modular unit that they're in now, and that's the location that the tennis courts would be constructed on.
Down the line, Councilor Shelby?
Well, I had a question about the elevator. Thank you. I'm glad there's elevators there. The other question I had was this $350,000 subsidy that we would, how are we?
Well, thank you, Counselor, for the question. Maybe I could jump in on this one a little bit. So in terms of the operating cost of the facility, one, I think these numbers will probably get a little more defined as time goes on and architectural design dwells down into them. It was a better number than I had guessed. You know, I like to guess at cost. I pride myself at being reasonably accurate, and so it was better than I anticipated. But we're talking about doing, in fact, I talked with Jim about it today. We're going to look at doing a business plan, if you will, like a general fund operation strategy, to take a look at our 5-year projected costs. We need to take a look at projected growth in this community and factor in other things like growing public safety programming, which I know is important to a lot of people, as well as what the general fund could support sustainably from adding these new costs. As you know, our costs continue to escalate. Our revenues continue to be fairly flat. And that might roll back into what we charge for fees, for example. The question was, how much does it cost to use a facility? Well, what we can subsidize out of the general fund and any difference might be part of that revenue generation strategy for the use of the facility. We just don't really know yet, and I think it's going to be a while before we can really say with any kind of certainty what we think the general fund can absorb in terms of operational expense. But I also want you to know that this is, this has been weighing on me a little bit. The costs associated are going to be the construction cost, which will be, worst case scenario, the $52.7 million. I know that there's a talk and our hopes of some sort of a capital campaign to maybe buy those costs down. But then there's the ongoing operational costs and the expense of staffing and operating programs, and that's the other side of it we have to look at too. So I would, I'll tell you that before this hits any bond, any ballot title, the city, I'll have a recommendation for you in terms of what the general fund's viability is of operating that facility. I can't imagine we could go to the community, we'd have to go to the community in good faith and tell them that there is in fact an operation plan that won't impact other levels of services, particularly public safety programming in this, that we currently have. So we're talking about it and we're working on it, and it won't be the last that you hear about the numbers.
Okay.
Is that helpful, Counselor?
Yes, it does. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thank you.
Councilor Morris?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. So, has anybody run the numbers on what a $50 or $53 million bond would be for taxpayers?
We took the numbers that we ran for a $35 million bond and basically just, figured out the and it was about 50% more. If I remember right, we were looking at about $20 a month or $240 a year, so that put us up to like $30 a month, $360 a year on the average assessed valued home in Woodburn.
And Jim, I know I'm just hitting you with this. You probably shouldn't listen to ask this question, though. What would that average value home be that would pay
I
that?
don't recall what the average assessed value is.
Okay.
Off the top of my head, sorry.
No worries. Thanks.
We all know it's getting higher.
I think the problem, now that I've been in politics for a while, I'm getting the trend of how we do these things, and we did something very similar with the school bond, where we sat down with a committee of people that I was actively involved with, and we said, what do we want for the school bond? And we did the same kind of a process where we built it out, design build, and it was, $80, $100 million is what we came back with the designers came back with. And we're like, oh my God, that's a lot of money. I think it was ultimately 63 million that passed, barely passed. So in a sense, I think having, and I appreciate the community coming in and saying, this is what we really want. But I think a lot of times we say, this is what we really want, but what can we actually afford? I mean, I would love to have a Mercedes SUV, but we drive a Volkswagen SUV at my house. And it's a great vehicle, it has all the things and all the safety and all the basic necessities we need. But a lot of times when we go through these kind of plans, this looks very, very impressive. I just don't think, quite frankly, we can afford to build it and then, and when we talk about maintaining and running, we go back 5 or 6 years to where we were going to close down our aquatic center, and we had to really clamp down on operational costs, increase costs to the community, and really dial that back in to make it survive the process. So I think my thoughts are that, this is an interesting presentation tonight, but I think we really need to say, this is how much we can afford to build, and what can we get for that price, instead of the other way around. Like, if this is what we want, this is how much it's going to cost. How are we ever going to pay for it? I think we're kind of looking. It's a tougher solution to figure it that way, in my opinion. Now, I'm sure that people have other thoughts, but this is I expect next time we talk about it, if we don't change course a little bit, it'll be like 65, 70 million, because there's going to be things you guys didn't anticipate, we didn't anticipate, around water issues, parking issues, those kind of things. So that's my biggest concern. We have a big dream list. Now we need to say, practically, what can we afford for the community? And then say, yeah, we could do that and we can make it happen, versus, yeah, it's a great plan, but it's going back on the shelf because we couldn't afford to make it happen.
That's my concern. I agree with that. I don't want to be on, like, a picture on MSN that says abandoned community center, Yeah, these places that were beautifully built, but we can't afford to keep it open.
Well, on that note, I'd like to invite 2 members of the Community Center Advisory Committee. And why don't you could both come up, and
I guess they can pray.
I think they have some possible.
I have another question before they start talking. So we know that the Boys and Girls Club have like a community garden area. Is that something that, is there an area where they can still have that? Or like it could be just like a big community thing that like?
I can't say we've had that discussion yet, but I'm sure that we could find a place for them to continue their community garden operation on that park site.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just quickly add more comment in terms of funding and where we stand tonight. The council knows, I think that this phase of the project is funded by a $1 million grant that the city received by the efforts of quite a few people, some of which are at the table over there tonight, in addition to $300,000 of funding that the city has contributed to this particular phase of the project. So the red line we had up there, I believe, is the extent of where our funding will take us on your chart tonight. So in terms of moving forward, this part of the project is already funded, and we have the dollars to complete this aspect of the project so far.
All right.
Dylan Wells. Good evening, councilors and mayor. I am a resident over on 10408 Crosby Road. So I am the boundary for Woodburn on the north side over there. But one of my many roles is I'm on the executive committee of the Marion Polk YMCA. And I think kind of talking around, I think as a funding option, I think it's something we could look at. Currently, they are running the Silverton Aquatic Center. The city council has done a couple votes on keeping the Salem Polk County YMCA active in that process. It has saved them budget dollars in operations. They are running the Independence location as well, which is kind of taking some of that operations cost as well down. A lot of the politics of it is it takes jobs, but the jobs are still there. It just kind of shuffles things around on who they're working for. There is also a large programming, national programming that is accessed through an organization like YMCA or through Boys and Girls Club as well. So that's something down the line that could consider. And I believe Anthony is also going to speak about capital funding. You ask a lot of citizens, do they want to donate a chunk of change to the city, or would they rather look at a organization with a mission statement? And sometimes they look at donating to an organization versus giving money to a city government. So those are options. And currently, the Salem YMCA just received a $12 million lottery fund through the state legislature to rebuild their building downtown. They are currently going through their budget for their facility is a $26.2 million project. It is much smaller, but it is going through, and there is funding out there. So kind of talking, Woodburn is one of those grant writers' dreams if you look at all the demographics. And also the gentleman that kind of made things happen for the Salem YMCA is also the senator for Woodburn as well. So I think there is an opportunity for us to politically try to reach some funds that aren't, per se, on that sheet of paper right there. There's also some foundations that have given to the Salem YMCA that are based right here in Woodburn that I think we could tap as well. So I think there are some options as you're thinking through this. I was the vice chair for this citizens committee, and we did run through a lot of options. So if there's anything else, I support the option 1A, just because it looked like it utilized most of the things that we wanted to do. And also, I'm going to steal this from Anthony. He said, shoot for the stars and hopefully land on the moon. So that's kind of the thought on this one.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council, City Staff. Anthony Velis, 1200 Country Club Road, a citizen of Woodburn, and I was part of the, I am part of the Woodburn Community Center. So first of all, I want to thank the architects and the staff. I think they're doing an amazing job to bring the vision to life. I think it's a lot easier to be able to look at something and then be able to comment on that. I also do appreciate your community engagement opportunities. And this, as that started, a few years ago, the community engagement. So this has not just like happened the last few months. This has been years and years, probably decades in the making. So we are moving forward on a dream that this community has had for decades, I would think by now. And so I would say a couple things. I'm just going down my list. Definitely, so overall, I agree with what is being proposed. I do am for option, the first option that is the gentleman to my right, Dylan, is for. I do like one of the things that was said. I really want to just comment out as a cultural part of it. When when you see community centers, you know, they kind of have, some of them have a same look and feel, but I think this is a great opportunity to make ours unique, right? With the cultural diversity, the generational diversity, all kinds of things like that. And I know that one of the things I thought is Hector Hernandez, who helped us with who's a couple with the murals, and he's also helped out with the new Farmer Housing Development Corporation facility, that he might be somebody good because he knows our community to consult with when it comes to the cultural architectural design. He did an amazing mural for us downtown. Also, I want to say what I liked about this too is a lot of the energy efficiency. That's really important to our community and our committee, and I'm sure all of you. So you know, make sure that we're taking that into account. I agree with the senior center. I would like to see something for the community center. If I had my way, I would give them the space versus the Boys and Girls Club. The reason being is because I have heard a lot in my journey with the people from here with the senior center, and that was something that's always stuck in my head. And the diversity of our senior center, the seniors that are here in Woodburn that could really utilize the space. But that's just my personal opinion, not the opinion of the committee. And when it comes to you know, the costs, I just want to say, bless you. One of the things is about just because something is new, it's not the Cadillac. I drive a Cadillac, actually. It's 2012 though. But it doesn't mean that we're asked that's like the best we can do, right? We are one of the largest cities in Oregon without a community center. There's many community centers. There's a Kroc Center. There's the ones in Hillsborough. There's some in smaller communities in rural Oregon. But one thing that I think that there's a value beyond just the cost, right? And it's the bringing the quality of life for all of us here when it comes to community centers and people from Woodburn. We don't really have a central gathering place. We use our schools as community centers, and those are out-tapped already. But this can really bring our community together. It's kind of like I almost see one of the icing on the cake, the cherry on top is what's missing here in Woodburn. As far as costs, I think that we need to explore the option of, and I'll just be transparent, Dylan and I have talked about this why concept. When I think about the fund development, yeah, $53.2 million is a lot of money. And I've said this before in front of the council, but that there is a real possibility that we could take this cost off the cost of the taxpayers and put it more in a private concept with a YMCA, for example. Then there's really then it's almost like there is no operating cost because everything is really fund development through private money. And if you look at the Kroc Center, all the Ys across the country, I'm not the expert in the model, but there's a bunch of them, right? They've been around for 100 years. So there will be no wasteland when it comes to community center. I've never seen one in my life, but I think that they're needed more than ever, especially when you think about the wellness of communities now, that big term. Like I call it the community center, but it's going to serve more a purpose than just than a community center. It's more wellness. So I think that there's models out there where we can definitely, when the initial cost $53 million, I've already said it publicly, I'm committed to raise a good chunk of that. Starting this when people tell me go, I'm going to go, and I'm thinking January through June, and we'll see what we can do. So I don't think we're not going to come to the voters with a $53 million bond at all. I think what it'll probably look like is probably less than half, $25 million, and maybe what we do is we raise $35 million and we put $10 million in an endowment, which is basically pays for the operations of it, or $20 million or $30 million. I think that's the way to look at this. Then you're not even really looking at the operating cost anymore because it's in an endowment, right? It's actually going to get that extra $350, $400 million. That could be a possibility. So there's a lot of options there on the table. I know this is kind of just the initial phase, but I just want to thank again the architect, the city, and all of you for supporting this. Again, this is decades in the making. And what we're hearing today is really exciting because I think we're coming to the cusp of it, and I think that there's a lot of energy behind me, in front of and behind, that would really step up to do the fund development piece and make this happen. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any other comments or questions?
I have to admit I'm confused. I'm confused by what I just heard. I don't really understand what you said. Are you suggesting that we go as far as the bonding process, and then some night you show up with 15 or 20 people who are going to give us $500,000 each? Or are you suggesting that we start a telephone tree here within the city and start calling people? I've heard what you said, but I don't understand it.
I think that,
I can answer that because you're asking the question to me, but go ahead, Mayor.
I think the background for that question is when I'm sitting in that little room doing Zumba with, 8 other people, and it's kind of closed, you're getting closed in on, or we have tons of, all my son's birthday parties have been there in that little room. Like, how many bricks are on that wall? And it's pretty inspiring to see, like, how the people in you can tell me the year, that came together to support a community project. So to me, that's the background of a capital campaign where you're doing that. And so,
do you want to say something about that? Or so basically,
How do you do it?
How do you do it? Oh, well, it's a different, multi-pronged approach. One is a federal grant approaching our our senators, and there's money at the federal level. And then there's money at the state level. Like, for example, like Dylan said, the Y in Salem was awarded $12 million. That can happen here in Woodburn as well. That's a third of the way, or at least a third of the money. Plus, Woodburn, is a regional. It's going to be a regional hub. So my thought is going outside of Woodburn, and basically looking for private donors. There's foundations. There's all kinds of different options. It's not going to just be 5 people are going to show up and write a check, or we're going to have like a bake sale, which we are, and we will, because every penny counts. But I think what you have to do is just a multi-pronged strategy to bring in the cost down. Because I agree, I don't think this should be on only the burden of the Woodburn residents, because of the fact that people are going to use it from all over the region. They're going to come from Hubbard, Jervis, St. Paul, probably all over. They already come from these places already. The aquatic team from North Marion, they use it. I don't know what that cost is, but so that's what it would be. It's basically a capital campaign, a fund development campaign to bring the cost down to the taxpayers. And that's kind of in a nutshell. Did you want to add anything?
No, my comment was just more on operations. The Y can look at a lot of a budget and say, these are burdens that we don't have as a private nonprofit versus a government running a business, basically.
What does it take to get the YMCA to make a commitment? Is there a time frame? Is there?
It takes basically, I'm not the expert at it, but a board to be established here in town and start pushing for a Y presence. The CEO has a whole checklist of things that kind of goes on. We've had the preliminary talks on, hey, what does it take? And basically it takes some people in town saying, hey, we want a YMCA in town, and kind of start small with some programming, and then start building. But it would all come out of the Marion Polk County YMCA, and so it would just be a subsidiary under that.
Are you talking about an operation and maintenance contract with the city?
Yeah, so currently Sherwood they built a community center. The city built it, and then the Sherwood YMCA runs it. So they take their programming and operations, and there is a subsidy from them to kind of help out, but correct.
You're probably familiar with the fact that that was a very controversial arrangement.
Yeah, and I think with when you're trying to do a private and government quasi thing, I think it kind of politics always plays something into it.
Right. Other questions comments for anybody in the front of us?
I know everybody keeps mentioning the Kroc Center, and I know the Kroc Center looked at coming to Woodburn and took a pass on Woodburn, my understanding. But the Kroc Center, which is a part of the Salvation Army is what it is. But that wasn't just all foot by the Joan Crockett's Kroc Memorial Fund, I believe it is, as part of the Salvation Army.
Ray
There
Kroc.
was a huge community donation fundraising effort that went along with that. I can't remember the scope of it, but it wasn't publicized. Most people are like, hey, the Crawfish came in and built that. But I know they looked at Woodburn and passed on it. So as we talk, and I think back to Boys and Girls Club, and the Boys and Girls Club made a big push here in Woodburn probably 7 or 8 years ago. And it just didn't really work out. So that's, from my point of view, I want to build something we can afford to build without, and if you guys can come through, great. But I don't think there's anybody on the council sitting here that's not sold on the fact that we need a community center, and we think it'd be cool to have one. But I think, in my position, we have to be realistic that we're gonna actually get something built for the $1 million we've already got from the state, and then have something for the community in the first place. But I just think we need to be realistic. I know you guys are pitching it hard because it sounds good to say, hey, we need to build this and stuff. I think you've convinced us we need it. We all know we need it because we live here just like you guys do. But I think we need to be realistic. And nothing on Cadillacs, but I think we just need to be realistic about what the community can afford to have. And there's nothing wrong with saying we can't build we can't afford to build a $53 million unit. And part of me is like, hey, I just opened my property tax bill the day before yesterday and went, oh yeah, fire department, school, city. People do the same thing. I don't obsess about my property taxes, but there are people who definitely do because they are on a fixed income. And I believe everybody's basically on a fixed income because you only make so much money basically. So I think that's something we need to keep in mind as a council that, you know, we can't always afford all the things we want, just like we can't always afford the newest iPhone. So I think we need to be practical about that. Councilor Carney, I think that's a great question. I think these guys have some great ideas and some great aspirations, but I think we just need to, from a council's perspective, we need to base our decision-making on what we can actually, as a council, influence. If you guys can bring big money to the table, like in a stack sitting on that table, then I'd be interested in talking about it. But, you know, otherwise, yeah, it's gonna be cool when we do get something going.
Okay, other questions or comments?
I do.
Lisa?
I've got a slightly different take. I agree with almost everything that you say. I've been in Woodburn now since '98, and one of the things that has always bugged me is when people say, well, that's good enough for Woodburn. I hate that saying more than anything. That's good enough for Woodburn. So I'm at a point where I really think Woodburn deserves something of this magnitude. I agree that we may not be able to afford it. So what I'm thinking in my mind is I do like option 1A. I think that's the right option for us if given the options that are before us. I also know that if these folks don't come to the table with a stack of money when this goes out for bond, the citizens of Woodburn are going to speak. And for me, what I would vote for is what I think is the best option for Woodburn right now. But this is going to go on the bond, and the citizens of Woodburn are going to have their say. So if you don't come back with that stack of money, if we don't go out for those grants, if we don't have that other funding, the citizens of Woodburn are going to shut it down. But I do feel like I should give them the opportunity of something of this magnitude that they deserve. Having said that, you know, you got your work cut out for you, because if you don't come back with that little bit, even if it's half, for me, I'm thinking, okay, I've got 25 million sitting on the table that's gonna disappear if I don't give a little bit in my property tax. All right, I'm much more willing to meet you halfway, so to speak. But if you come back in a year and it's like, you want me to foot the whole 50, I will be the first one to check no on my vote. But I do believe that Woodburn deserves something of this magnitude.
Agreed. I agree.
May I say something, Councilor? No pressure, right? I don't think anybody's ever raised $25 million for the city of Woodburn in a private, so no pressure, right?
Hey,
No, I mean,
I
I'm
will
just
bake-
kidding. I'm
I
just
will
totally
bake
joking.
cookies with
I'm
ya.
totally joking. I'm totally joking. Thank you. That's it, we're done.
All right.
Or any other questions?
All right, thank you so much.
No, Mr. Mayor, one of the things that it sounds like we're about to move on is that at the start of this week, I tried to press that we are looking for a definitive direction from the council to move forward with what's going to be, a lot of work and money spent towards completing this aspect of the project. So It might be helpful maybe if there was just a motion to move forward with option 1A and a council direction in that regard.
Anybody feel like they want to make that motion? If not, I will. Mr. Mayor, I make the motion that we move forward with option 1A as described by the gentleman from Opus.
I second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye, motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, turn the page. We'll move to the consent agenda. Can I have the city recorder please read the items aloud?
The items on the consent agenda are as follows. Woodburn City Council minutes of September 23rd, 2019. Woodburn Planning Commission minutes of August 8th, 2019. Community Center Citizens Advisory Committee minutes of September 4th, 2019. Woodburn Recreation and Park Board minutes of September 11th, 2019. Leasing Specialists LLC agreement, building activity for September 2019, and liquor license application for the place.
Would anyone like to remove an item or have a question about the items?
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we accept the consent agenda.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. General business. We have Council Bill number 3110 in front of us. Do we have a staff report?
Oh, we do. Should we read the resolution?
Yes, point of order, we should read the resolution and then have the staff report by title only.
And then we'll put Curtis on the hot seat.
And actually, we also need a counselor to introduce the council bill.
Council Bill number 3110, a resolution adopting local wastewater discharge limits for the discharge of pollutants of concern to the publicly owned treatment system and repealing resolution number 1817.
Council Bill 310 has been duly introduced, and as a resolution and such requires one reading. Will you please have the reading by title only?
Council Bill number 3110, a resolution adopting local wastewater discharge limits for the discharge of pollutants of concern to the publicly owned treatment system and repealing resolution number 1817.
Is there any discussion? Do we have an exclamation for?
I think he escaped.
Did anybody see him leave? I didn't. I was reading the resolution.
Do we have a staff report?
Lucky he was not abducted by aliens. I love how he was gone.
It's a pretty funny business.
Is this your first staff report in front of the council?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
I should have had a practice run.
I think maybe you're getting one.
Huh? Getting one? Yeah, on the hot seat.
Done well, we'll give you a standing ovation.
Yeah, doubtful. So, okay, back. Am I just reading the whole thing here, or what am I doing?
Well, Curtis, why don't you describe a little bit, what is this, what is the local wastewater discharge permit limits and discharge of pollutants? And
Curtis,
why
why don't you
is this on
introduce
here?
yourself?
Hi, Curtis Stoltz. I am the Public Works Operational Director for the City of Woodburn, temporarily, hopefully.
Council will be nice to you. Go ahead and just talk about what this is and why it's important.
So what we've got here is we've got the local limits are what the community and the industries are allowed to discharge to the wastewater treatment plant. And what we do is the pretreatment program regulates the level of which these industries can discharge to us. Our treatment plant is only designed to take out a certain level of pollutants. Some of those pollutants we can't take out at all. So some of them are going to bioaccumulate in our biosolids, and those will be some of the heavier metals. So when that happens, then we have what's called a pass-through. It'll go out to the environment, and then we can hurt the environment as far as the amount of, let's say, copper or zinc or something like this that passes through our wastewater treatment plant. So the only way that we can regulate on what we receive is by having a restriction that's put on the dischargers of those metals. So what this allows us to do is that when we upgraded our treatment plant several years ago, is we had to go through and do a study and figure out with the new treatment parameters which one of these pollutants that we could and couldn't allow to come into our treatment plant. Fortunately, with the size of our treatment plant and the processes that we installed, we were able to relax a lot of the pollutants loadings so that we could accept more into our treatment plant and not have to put more of a restriction on the dischargers.
Very good. So this is a requirement?
This is a requirement from EPA and through the local DEQ, which runs the program for the feds.
And so by allocating these capacity units to the various uses, it's going to keep us in the good graces of our permitting agency and allow our business, residential and commercial businesses to continue to operate with impunity for the city.
Correct.
Well said. Okay, any questions, Frank?
So it's fair to say this isn't it's not optional.
This is not optional, correct, so.
Well, if the council didn't approve this, then we would be in violation of our permits for the operation of the wastewater plant, and we would have to go down a more difficult path.
Of enforcement and all those type of things for restrictions.
This might be a good time to entertain a motion.
I move we approve Council Bill number 3110.
This requires a roll, excuse me, roll call vote.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Counselor Morris? Aye. Counselor Schaub?
Aye.
Counselor Ellsworth?
Aye.
Counselor Carney?
Aye.
Counselor Cabrales?
Aye.
Counselor Cornwell?
Yes.
Motion carries. Right, next, we have Planning Commission, 90 sections, a call-up briefing. Anyone like to call up this item? So in that case, we move on?
On to my report, Mr. Mayor.
Please.
I have just a few things for the city council tonight, Mr. Mayor. The council will remember our facilitator from our last goal setting session, John Morgan. John is coming back for round 2, which we have scheduled for November 2nd, which is a Saturday, which is quickly approaching. I've talked to John. John would like to come to our next city council meeting, October 28th, to talk a little bit with you about finalizing the agenda for then following Saturday's goal setting. And I've talked to him a little bit. He really wants to see you and talk to you about it and sort of set the stage for a successful event that Saturday. So I told him that I would tell you that he wants to come and talk to you ahead of time a little bit as a council. And before that happens, I'm also going to send out a little email asking each councilors to respond to me with a list of 2, 3, 4 things that you'd like to see covered in terms of topic for that day, so that John and staff can have a little bit of a heads up and for any prep work we need to do on that. I'm going to send you something called the Housing Needs Assessment. It's a housing needs analysis, which is part of our comprehensive plan and has been something that I've been having conversations about with some of you up there. You know who you are. It seems like it's a timely topic for the city right now. It's going to also be on the agenda for October 28th City Council meeting as a presentation. We have one now, and this is an update of our existing plan. don't be surprised when you see it. It talks a little bit about housing needs, economics, and whether there's enough land to accommodate housing for all of the needs within the city for the next 20 years. And I'm happy to give you the spoiler alert. We do, which is very good for us and the result of a lot of hard work over the years. But I'm going to send that to you so you have a chance to look at it, maybe think about it, and have questions. You can, if you have any, for the October 28th City Council meeting. Also on the 28th, I've talked to the mayor and decided it would really be great for the city to have a committee to help push out information on the upcoming census effort that's underway. As you know, the census is really important for the allocations of dollars for the state of Oregon and also to the city of Woodburn. In fact, there was talk tonight about resources allocated to cities in the vicinity. We care about that, and we care about having an accurate count of the people in our community. And sometimes people don't want to participate in that for a variety of reasons. Before I was a city administrator, I didn't like it, but now I do. And so we want to encourage people that it's safe, that if somebody knocks on your door with the U.S. Census Department, you have no reason to be fearful of that person. That if you get something in the mail from the U.S. Census, we'd encourage you to fill it out and return it. And that it helps Woodburn and it helps our community. So yes, Councilor Morris.
So if somebody comes to my door with the U.S. Census, is that soliciting?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask me that.
No, you might, because I just thought about it.
Well, potentially, I don't know what the policy is of the U.S. Census Department or how the ordinance would apply, but that'd be a great thing for our committee to evaluate when they're pushing out the information.
But I can tell you, because I've had a couple of meetings at Marion County, this is months ago, but about those initial conversations. This year will be the first decade where there'll be a huge electronic push out. So if you're in the right world, you can just do it by email.
In the world where there's a lot of scams and there's a lot of people asking for personal information, we want people to not just simply delete this or look at it and think that it's a scam. We want people to participate. It's really in our interest that they do. And it's also in their interest as well. For people like consuming public services and driving on streets and things that these dollars sometimes decide for us in terms of the count. At the end of this week, I'm going to be out. I'll be out most, if not all, of next week at the ICMA conference, which is the International City Managers Association. Looking forward to that. I haven't been to a national conference in like 12 or 13 years. So I'll be at that, and I'll be back in time for the next city council meeting. I'd hate to miss that. And then finally, I want to tell you that I'm talking with League of Oregon Cities right now. We've got a tentative date coming up at the first of the year where they'd like to send their entire League of Oregon Cities staff to Woodburn to conduct, they're going to conduct their a staff meeting, but then they're interested in exposing their staff to municipal operations and what it's like in local government. They represent cities all over the state, and they're looking to try to integrate their people more into the day-to-day types of issues that we grapple with. They think Woodburn has a lot of stuff going on right now that it would be good for them to see firsthand and have conversations about. I'd like them to meet with city councilors, incorporate you into that if we can somehow, so that they can hear from you as well as staff, and I'll be sending information out to you the closer we get to that. But it looks like the LOC is gonna come here and spend an entire day talking about the challenges of local government. And
Which month do you have a general time?
Oh, I do, and I didn't write it down.
I think it's early December.
Yeah, it might be early December or January, right about that time frame. I'm saying it's in pencil, and as soon as it's firmed up, I'll let everybody know. And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor, unless there's any questions about anything.
So I went to Scott's office 3 times today and said, there's this one question I have, and I couldn't remember what it was.
And now you know.
So, what's that? The discussion of the enterprise zone and the land on the other side of, when does that occur?
Okay, so the city is going to be proposing that Woodburn expand its enterprise zone to encompass the remaining industrial property that was annexed to the city based on conversations we've had with the owner of that property about spec development. The process associated with expanding the enterprise zone is not complicated. We've done this in the past. In fact, the entire city is in enterprise zone. Councilors may remember that we also manage the enterprise zone for Jervis, and they're a partner with us in that. And so as the process goes, there's notification requirements. I don't know, Jamie, so is it 30 days, 60 days?
21 days.
How many? 21. Okay, 21 days. And then the other jurisdictions have to weigh in. So we are going to go to the Jervis City Council and get their blessing before it comes to this city council. You may see a notice on that. And then this should be in front of this council on the 28th?
No, on the 12th.
No, November 12th? And then we'd expect to see that on November 12th for the city council's consideration to expand the enterprise zone to pick up that remaining portions of what was annexed to the city. So November 12th, Mr. Mayor, is the target date. That was a long answer for an easy question, so.
I knew there was something, so. Okay, council reports?
I did go on Thursday. Habitat for Humanity broke ground on the end of Aztec. I got there a little late, yes, but they were a good gathering and they were serving lunch and looked like a really nice piece of property, all open behind, so whoever's going to live there is surely going to enjoy it, I would think.
You must have crossed paths.
Oh, I
was there
missed
for the
you.
first section
I was
and then-
looking for you, yes.
I just wanted to recognize that today is Indigenous Peoples' Day, so I just wanted to say that. It's Indigenous Peoples' Day today, so just wanted to say that.
The banks were closed in honor
Yes.
of events?
Yeah.
Councilor Carney?
The high point of my week was going to the grand opening at
Colonial.
Unidad.
Unidad.
And it was really, it was a very wonderful experience. And I'm sure the mayor and Councilor Ellsworth was also there, and Councilor Schwab will have further communications on it. But it's a project that I worked on in my first term here. And it's another example of the affordable housing that we're working on in this community.
So, like you said, the Colonial Unidad opened up. It's actually a very nice facility. The grounds look beautiful. At our last council meeting, we had people come before us with a request specifically with respect to low-income housing. And after that, I did go to the League of Oregon Cities with a number of our council members, and I took it to heart and took the opportunity at the League of Oregon Cities to actually educate myself about housing, the housing issues and housing crisis that we are facing here in Oregon. And I can tell you that one small piece is just the low-income housing. Affordable housing actually impacts all of Oregonians. And the education that I got at the League of Oregon Cities was very valuable. I'm really happy to hear that we will be bringing this up maybe during our retreat, but at the next meeting, that we are going to be looking at the actual housing needs in Woodburn. It's a whole lot easier to make decisions from the council when you have a strategic plan and when you have a comprehensive plan that takes into account all of the needs. So I'm really looking forward to having that discussion and understanding exactly what the needs are here in Woodburn. Once we have that understanding, it's a lot easier when somebody comes before us to say, that request either brings us closer to our strategic goals or brings us further away from our strategic goals. So the housing issues in Oregon are so much more complex than whether or not we can approve a tax break for one small facility. So I'm really glad that we were able to go to the League of Oregon Cities and actually get some education on that topic. I think it was really timely. Thank you for letting us know that you'll be coming back in front of us with that actual information. I do appreciate that. It's easier to make good decisions when you have good information.
I agree. Councilor Ellsworth and I attended the League of Cities conference, and it was so educational, and even the tours that we went on. I happened to go to the one for the water treatment plant it's newly built in Bend. Very, very interesting. I also attended the Colonial Unidad grand opening. Lovely facility. I was impressed with just the way the citizens were so excited and so proud. And it was just a great opportunity. Like it was mentioned before, this has been a project we've worked on for quite some time, and now it came to fruition, and I think it's an asset to Woodburn. And I did want to comment, the trees are planted in the city. I'm so excited about that. It looks wonderful. What else? I think that's it. Thanks.
Councilor Morse? And I'll echo the, especially as my first year and as an elected official, like the Oregon League of Cities Conference was a great opportunity. And, you know, and just at lunch, like I sat next to the whole, well, not the whole, because it wasn't a quorum, but like many Corvallis city councilors and got to know about that. Another session with councilors and mayors from like the coast, Newport and Lincoln City and there. And many of the sessions were around housing, which was like Lisa said, topical. And what I took away from it is like there's lots of entities looking for lots of ways to address housing in their communities. And so again, I look forward to seeing that in the big picture, as well as we're seeing, you know, with enterprise zones and the different kinds of things, that big picture of what does government do to facilitate growth in business, growth in housing, what can we do? So I left feeling really good about that, as well as it was good to see people at the Colonia Unidad project as well. So those were all.
You just like dancing the night away.
That's true, yeah, and we did dance the night away there with an awesome music. So anything else for the good of the order?
I move we adjourn.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.